Get more confidence. Get that promotion. Get moving up the corporate ladder. Get a better gig with an MBA from Mays Business School at Texas A&M University. Whether you're starting out or stepping up, now you can take your career to a whole new level with a full-time MBA in College Station and convenient weekend options at Houston City Center. Texas A&M has a program to suit your schedule. Visit mba.tamu.edu. And Giga Maggie.
Howdy, welcome to Mays MasterCast. I'm Shannon Deere, the Associate Dean for Undergraduate Programs, here with your stupendous host, Ben Wiggins.
Hey, Shannon, what is happening today?
Not much. How are you?
It's a beautiful day in Aggie Land.
It is. It's been amazing weather and just a beautiful day in general, but the weather has been incredible.
Yes, it really has. And looking forward to seeing what the rest of the week holds.
Yeah, absolutely. Today on the show, we have Corey Anthony. In his role as Senior Vice President of Human Resources and Chief Diversity Officer at AT&T, Corey is responsible for identifying and developing leaders, aligning employees with the company's vision and priorities, overseeing business unit HR support, and employee engagement. He also leads AT&T efforts to leverage its leadership in diversity and inclusion to drive innovation and growth, as well as the company's EEO and affirmative action policies. Corey gives back to his community by serving on the board of directors for Junior Achievement in Dallas CASA, which he talks about on the show. He is a passionate advocate for diversity and inclusion. Corey co-founded a chapter of AT&T's African American Employee Resource Group, the Network, and today serves on the board for Asian Pacific Islanders for Professional and Community Achievement, OASIS, and the company's millennial group, Oxygen. Corey earned his Bachelor of Business Administration degree with a double major in finance and accounting from Texas A&M. He and his wife, Priscilla, live in Dallas with their children, Monty and Riley. Welcome, Corey, to the show.
Welcome. This is a great conversation. Really, I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. It is my pleasure to welcome Corey Anthony to the show. Corey, how are you doing today?
Fantastic. How are you guys doing?
I am great. We are excited to have you here. How was your weekend?
The weekend was productive. So this was a good weekend. I had a number of things on my list, Ben, that I needed to get done. And I got done. I finished probably about half of that list.
That's better than I usually do. Most weekends, I'm lucky to hit 20%. That's my metric is 20%.
That's why I'm excited, man. I exceeded my own expectations here. So yeah, it was a good weekend.
Fantastic. What is your favorite superpower, Corey?
Commitment.
Okay, tell me more.
Commitment. And I think it is one of the most overlooked characteristics of successful leaders and people who are successful in whatever it is that they pursue is commitment. And so it's one of the things that I value in myself, I value in others. And I really do think it's a key differentiator when we start to evaluate leaders.
That's a fantastic answer. I love that. Can you share with me what you feel like commitment is not?
Yeah.
What are the misperceptions about what commitment is?
Just because people say that they are committed to an issue, committed to a cause, committed to an organization, does not mean that they really are. And so I think one of the key ingredients to commitment is sacrifice.
Oh.
So I don't know that you can have true commitment to anything without being able to identify what you have sacrificed in the name of that commitment.
That's interesting. So then if you wanted to demonstrate commitment quickly, do you ever end up in a catch-22 in a situation where you want to quickly demonstrate that commitment, but you feel like you're not yet sure what you want to sacrifice or where you want to sacrifice? Does that ever happen to you?
It doesn't, but it doesn't happen to me because there are very few things. I can't think of anything where I have quickly wanted to commit to it.
Oh, I like this.
Right. So
keep going.
I think you spend more time to make sure, be really thoughtful about whether or not it's something that you really want to commit to. To me, commitment, I don't take it lightly. I never enter into any true commitment lightly. So that's why I'm rarely pressed to demonstrate a commitment quickly, because I'm like, no. And I have people approaching me all the time wanting me to commit to some cause, some effort, some organization. And I don't do that lightly, nor do I do it quickly, right? I'm really thoughtful about it to make sure it aligns with what the values of the organization, my values, right? And then it's something that, again, I'm willing to make sacrifices on behalf of. Then I'll make the commitment.
We are off to a great start. Let's talk a little bit about you. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in the lovely huge city, thriving Jewett, Texas.
Jewett, yeah, I was actually through there last week on the way to Dallas. So, Fighting Chickens, I believe.
No. I don't know what Jewett that is. We're the Cougars, Leon Cougars.
I think one of my high school teachers might have lied to me because she was from Jewett, and I think she might have been playing up certain elements of Jewett and claimed that the mascot was not just the chicken, but the fighting chicken.
No, I don't. I'm trying to think of even the towns nearby. None of them have a chicken as a mascot. And if I did, think about that, Ben, would you actually own that a chicken is your mascot?
I sure would. I'd figure I'd find the most aggressive looking chicken icon on the internet and I'd post it all over everything.
Yeah.
How many in your family growing up?
So me, my mom, and my pops, just the three of us.
Okay. What did your parents do? How did that impact you?
So my mom was a cook. So one of the local restaurants there, literally from age 17 to 49, she had a massive stroke when she was 49 and lost the usage of her right side of her body. So she could no longer cook and work there anymore. And then my dad, we ran a service station there right at I-45, Interstate 45 and 79.
Yeah.
My dad had a tow truck service. So I grew up working in both of those.
Fantastic. Give us 60 seconds on your road through Mays and since.
Yeah. So Mays, man, it was so cool. So I get to A&M. The only thing that I knew at the time, Ben, is that I wanted to go into business. That's really when I showed up. That was what I said to my counselor initially. I just want to be in business. Mm-hmm. And she helped direct me towards accounting, which landed me, in Mays. And so that's how I got there. I knew I wanted to be in the business, and she convinced me that, hey, until you get a better sense for exactly what you want to do in business, get an accounting degree because you can do a lot of different things with an accounting degree. And so that's how I ended up there.
Okay. And then since then, walk us through a little bit of your career experience since then.
Yeah. So go through that while I'm at A&M, working towards the accounting degree, had done a couple of internships in accounting, and then realized I did not want to be an accountant. And so I added finance. So that's how I ended up with dual degree in finance and accounting. Yep. And so I was convinced at graduation, right, that I wanted to be in finance, and I landed at AT&T, and I was in what we call a leadership development program. So it was a structured program that by design, you get a number of assignments in different areas of the business. And so through that, I realized that while I still love finance, but I really love operations. I love leading teams, right? Yeah. In operations side of the business. And so I built my career at AT&T initially in the operations side of our business. And I was moving around to different functional areas within the company as well as geography. So I relocated with AT&T 9 times, physically relocated 9 times in my first 13 years with the company.
Wow.
Yeah. So from coast to coast, right? And all of those assignments were in the U.S. So I've never lived outside of the U.S. with the company. I've had teams that are global. And so I spent a lot of time out in other countries with my teams. But all of my assignments, I was based here in the U.S.
Okay. And then you moved into your current position as and I have it as Senior Vice President of Human Resources and Chief Diversity Officer, both titles.
So that's correct. And then as of a few months ago, we added to that the Chief Development Officer. So I have responsibility for all of the learning at AT&T. So think being the functional learning. So all of our technicians, all of our contact center agents, et cetera, the learning for them. And then I have the talent development, right? Leadership development for all of the managers and the senior leaders in our business, and what we call T University.
Okay.
So it's our learning arm. So I have that responsibility as well.
Fantastic. At the MTL Speaker Series last week, you said it's very difficult to fix what you can't measure in regards to what HR typically misses about inclusion. What measurement systems do you think have contributed most significantly to the creation of an inclusive culture at AT&T?
Yeah, that's a great question. The diversity aspect is easier to capture and measure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that, so think of your usual suspects like gender, ethnicity, and so on.
Yeah.
So those are easier to put systems in place where you can capture that data and measure it. Inclusion is a whole different animal, right? That's a more challenging thing to quantify so that you can measure it.
Yes.
How we do it at AT&T is a number of ways, but it primarily revolves around the employee giving us that feedback. So they tell us. So we have what we call our listening strategy.
Right.
So it's all the things that we do, how we engage our employees and get the feedback directly from them about our culture, about the workplace environment, et cetera. And so it's through things like what you all would, surveys is a good tool that we use. So we literally go out throughout the year and we ask employees, well, are you in an inclusive environment? Do you feel valued for who you are and what you bring to this business? Are you in an environment where you can bring your full self to work? Right. So it's those types of questions where we get the feedback and then we aggregate that feedback. And now I know at an organizational level, and then I can take that feedback down to frontline employees in smaller groups, so long as there are a minimum of at least 5 people in that team, in that group that responded, so that we can maintain anonymity when we do it. But then we can give feedback to those managers of those teams. Hey, this is how you and your team are doing with respect to these issues.
Out of curiosity, when you run into a situation where there's a team that doesn't seem to be clicking in that respect, without getting into anything private or proprietary, how do you handle that?
So it varies. There's not a one size fits all, but the first step we do is like what you would do in any good operations organization, right? Is you have to uncover what the root cause.
Yeah. Right.
So you don't deal with the symptoms. Oftentimes the feedback that we get, if you think about it, are really the symptoms. So if you were to use the analogy of us going to the doctor, we're sharing with the doctor the symptoms, and before they can give us a diagnosis, they have to, do a little more research. So we do the same thing. So we sometimes that means having more conversations with that team to get additional feedback and data. Sometimes that means looking at the other KPIs, right, or other indicators of what's happening with that team. And we do that with the leader, and that leader does that with their HR support. And then they create an action plan. So they identify what the challenges are, and then they create an action plan to respond to each one of those. And that action plan includes how we're going to measure and track, engage success, right, in our response.
Okay. If you could paint a vision for what AT&T's culture is like in 10 years, how would it look different from the way it is now? I mean, it seems like there's been a ton of progress in many companies in that respect, and I'm sure AT&T's made a ton of progress in that respect. But what are your goals for the next 10 years?
So here's the vision. Like, this is Nirvana, right? This is Nirvana. When we get to the place where we could grab any one of our 250,000 plus employees and say, hey, do you feel like AT&T is a workplace where you can achieve your fullest potential irrespective of what you look like, who you love, whether or not you have any disability, et cetera, doesn't matter. AT&T is a place where you can achieve your fullest potential. So when every single employee can say that, then that's success from an employee perspective. Success from a company perspective is not only when every employee can say that, but I can also say that as a leader in this business, right? We feel like as a company, we are extracting every ounce of talent from every employee in the business. So when those two things happen, then now you're in that place, I call it Nirvana, right? But you're at what it really is, an extremely high performing organization when those things happen. And we win in the marketplace. And at the end of the day, that's why we do this work, right? So that we can excel and win in the marketplace, in return, create a return for our owners. I mean, that's why we do this work.
Yeah. Now, and then let me contrast that with something that you said last week. You called it kind of a nirvana state, but it is not an end state, because you said you've said that there is no end state for diversity and inclusion. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yeah. So I had the benefit of a mentor years ago who helped me understand, and this is how this mentor characterized it. He said, look, there are problems that you fix and there are problems that you work on. And what he was trying to help me understand is there are some of these problems that are so large, right, and that are almost existential in the challenge you have in front of you, that you're always going to be working on, because you always can get better. So it sort of starts with that belief that you can always get better. So that's why when I think about DE&I, there's no end state, because you can always get better. You can always be more inclusive. You can always figure out ways to get a little more out of that talent, right? You can always figure out a way to attract more talent to your business. So there's no end state. So we're going to always be working on this. My successor, whoever replaces me when they decide to kick me out of this role and replace me, that person is going to take it to another level, right? In 10 years from now, 15 years from now, whoever is in this role will be looking at ways that how do they improve it. That will always be the case.
You have a passion for mentorship, and I appreciate you sharing what you learned from that mentor. Can you tell us a moment when a mentee taught you something, where you learned from someone that you were mentoring?
I'll give you one recently.
Sure, please.
Rewind the clock to last year, last spring, last summer. We all remember what was going on socially in the aftermath of the George Floyd killings. Yeah. And, we at AT&T were, dealing with that like every other entity was.
Sure.
There was a young lady in our company who was relatively new. She had only been with the business about 18 months. It was less than 2 years.
Yeah.
And she reached out to me, and we had never met. I didn't know her. She reached out to me and wanted to have a discussion about some things that she thought we could do differently in addressing this issue. So okay, cool. So got time with her, and I sat down with her, and she actually gave me some really good input around how I could communicate what AT&T needed to do in a more effective way that would resonate with employees that had not been here as long as some of the other employees. And so here I am, Ben, I'll be honest with you, thinking, hey, I'm sensitive to that too. I know how to communicate to our employee base, right? From 1 day employee to 35-year employee, I thought that I had my arms wrapped around that. But she pointed out some things that I quickly realized, no, maybe not so much. And so it's a great example of sort of reverse mentoring, right? She gave me that mentoring, then I turned around and talked with the team, and we made a few changes, and we were more effective in how we communicated. But it was because she took the initiative to point that out, and I was willing to listen to her.
What can you share about how you changed your approach after that? What obviously, I'm sure there are aspects of it that you can't talk about, but is there anything that you can tell us?
Yeah. So what she said is, hey, while we had done some of this, but she made it really clear we should do more of it. And that is create forums where employees can share their stories. She said, Corey, you guys have done a good job. We've heard from you. We've heard from John Stanky, who's our CEO. Yeah. We've heard our board weigh in on this. So the leadership has been clear about, how we think and view these issues, and what we're going to do. And we did have a couple of forums alongside the CEO where we had employees share. But she said, hey, you need to do more of that. And that needs to be more of a grassroots effort as opposed to something being structured from the leadership. Create forums, right? Make it easier that employees on their own can create these opportunities where they get to share and interact with each other. And Corey, you and your team don't have to be involved in it, but just give us the tools and resources to make it easier for us to do it on our own. And she was right. She was absolutely right. And that has led to all kinds of really successful initiatives that folks started on their own. Like a good example is one that I shared with our senior leadership this morning. One of our employees on their own decided to take Lovecraft Country, which is, I don't know if you've seen this incredible show. Yeah. Content that we have, right, that we created with HBO Max. But she decided to use that as a foundation for conversation. So she created this group. So each time they would watch an episode of Lovecraft Country, and then they'd have a discussion about that episode and the different lessons and learnings and how is that applicable to what we're doing at AT&T, et cetera. And she's gotten now this huge following. So if people started hearing about this and then decided, hey, you know what? I want to be a part of that and be a part of that dialogue. And now it's been replicated. So it's going viral inside of the company. And we didn't create that. I didn't come up with that idea. It was an employee who did it on their own. And it was one of the employees that's in our technology leadership development program who's relatively new to the business. And they did it themselves.
I applaud you for embracing change that quickly and embracing it in a context where it came from a place that it would have been easy to say, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm experienced. I know how to do my job. So again, I tip my cap. What has been the most difficult leadership lesson that you've learned in your career so far? What's been the thing that it was the hardest for you to say, all right, I am not doing this right in some way?
It was, I can distinctly remember it. I had been in the company not even 6 months. Mm-hmm. And I was in a role where I was leading a team. And I had this team. It was 17 folks on this team that I was leading. Yeah. Keep in mind, I'm new to the business, right? I'm just fresh out of A&M. And I had the average tenure on that team was like 26 years. And the only reason why the average was that low is because we had 3 folks who were relatively new. The majority of that team, as they pointed out to me, Ben, had been working at AT&T longer than I had been alive. So this is the team, right? Sure. And the lesson that I learned is I quickly, because they helped me with this, learned the lesson about personal power versus position power. Mm-hmm. I was the leader of that team on paper. I was their supervisor. I was their boss. So I had the position power, but I did not have the personal power on that team. A lady by the name of June Lawrence, bless her soul, she's now since passed, but she was the de facto leader on that team. June had 36 years service with the business. That team listened to her. And so I learned this lesson the hard way. There were all these things that I wanted to implement and changes that I wanted to make. And here I am making the business case for why we should do it differently, thinking that should win the day. But what I didn't take into account that if I didn't get June Lawrence on board, it wasn't going to work because the rest of the team was following her because she had personal power with that team. And that wins the day every time. And so I learned that lesson of when to use. There are times where it's appropriate to use position power, but more times than not, I want to be in the space where I'm using my personal power and my leadership capabilities. That way I'm inspiring and motivating folks to do what's best for the business, as opposed to using my position power and sort of, mandating it.
Sure.
Learn that lesson early on.
Yeah, and again, bravo for learning that lesson. I think it's one that's very hard for many people. What are your thoughts around how personal power and positional power to a lesser degree, but more personal power, how that plays with things like expectancy theory, and just how much personal power is tied in with your ability to see first of all, what the team has to do, but then within that framework to see what the other people on the team want and figure out how to connect what has to happen for the team with the results that those people want personally. What does that interplay look like for you?
The interplay looks like this, and it's another leadership lesson that I often impart, right, or at least attempt to, is understanding the difference between leading people and managing work. Because there is a distinct difference between the two. So let's use the framework that you just laid out.
Okay.
I use that position power to go and acquire the resources and the tools that are required for the team to be successful, right, in whatever that objective is. So that's using my position power to go argue with finance for more capital. That's using my position power to go argue with IT, right, for systems changes, et cetera. So I'm using my position power for that, right, because I have the access by virtue of my position to be able to go make that argument, whereas my team does not. That's managing the work. That's managing the work. I use my personal power to turn around now and communicate effectively, right, and motivate and push where needed, encourage where needed, the leaders to go and accomplish the goals that with those resources that I just helped obtain for them, right? That is leading the team. Right, I manage the work by going to get those tools and resources. Now I'm leading the team on how we're going to best utilize those tools and resources, right? How are we going to be effective and efficient in how we get this work done so that we accomplish the objectives. That's the interplay between those two. And that's how I use the personal power versus the position power to ensure that I'm managing the work and leading people.
Superb. Very well. That's wonderfully worded. What's the most counterintuitive advice you'd have for a business person at any stage of life? Just something that would surprise people about business and how to think about it.
As you approach a problem or a challenge that you have in the business, and if you're smart, there's all Aggies listening here, so all of you are smart by default, even the ones of you that transferred from UT. But you're smart. Your natural disposition is you're going to think that whatever idea you come up with is probably not only a great idea, but the best idea. What will be counterintuitive is always give yourself the space and permission to assume that you are wrong. That you are wrong. So challenge yourself. And the reason why that is so effective, again, when you're leading people, is when you do that, now you've given them permission, right? And you haven't even done it explicitly. You haven't stated, you don't have to verbalize this. But when they see you do it, you've given them permission to challenge. And that, if I see teams that are not operating at a really high level, is because they lack that element in how they interact and problem solve. They don't challenge each other. My team knows that not only am I going to do it, because one, I'm a contrarian by nature, so I kind of get there on my own anyway, but I welcome it from my team. Challenge me. Tell me that I'm wrong, right? Prove to me that I'm wrong, because I'm going to assume that there's a better solution than the one that's on the table. And if you're on my team and you're not offering those alternatives and those better solutions, if you just always go with my answer, then I question, why do I need you on the team? Because I'm already there. If all you're doing is telling me, yeah, Corey, your idea is a great one, let's go execute, then what in the hell do I need you for? I want somebody to challenge me. That's where innovation comes from. right? So I want someone who assumes that Corey's saying this, but that's probably not optimal. So let's go see if we can find something better. And then sometimes you're going to come back, you've identified a better path forward. And then times you're going to come back and say, you know what? No, that makes sense. Let's go execute on it. But I got to have that element of challenge on the team. If not, we're not optimizing our performance.
Tell us what led you to become involved with Dallas CASA and how that's CASA and how that work has affected you personally.
Yeah, thanks for asking about that. So CASA, CASA, Court Appointed Special Advocates. So it's an organization. We support kids that have been removed from their homes because of neglect or abuse. Mm-hmm. So Child Protective Services has come in, right, based on some reporting from teachers, authorities, et cetera, and has determined that this home is not a safe environment for that kid to be in. So they've removed them and they've put them in some type of foster care. Well, CASA comes in and we'll assign an advocate. So it's a volunteer. This is a person who's volunteering to say, I'm going to attach myself to this case and this kid, and I'm going to work with CPS. I'm going to work with the family courts. I'm going to work with their lawyers to identify a safe home that we can place that kid in. And that's the work that we do at CASA. And so that ranges from, hey, at times we work with their birth parents to get them into rehab, et cetera, get them to a place where they can safely reunite with the kids. Sometimes that means that can happen and we place them in kinship or family members. Sometimes that's with foster care. But whatever it is, we are literally working side by side with the other agencies and the courts, which is why it's called court appointed, because we are literally appointed by a judge to work with this kid in this case to place them. I got involved with CASA. A guy that I was working for at the time was working with the organization and introduced me to it. And so I started working with them and absolutely fell in love with the organization and the impact that they have on these kids, right? It literally changes the lives of these kids. And so I stayed involved. And today I have the privilege of chairing the board of directors for CASA. And I'm also a volunteer advocate myself. So I have a case now that I'm working on with 3 fantastic little boys that have been removed from, their household. And we found really good placement for them. My wife is a volunteer advocate, and she and I are co-CASA now is what we call it, but we're handling this case together. But it's I say all the time, Ben, it's God's work. It's God's work because these are the most vulnerable in our society, right? These kids that they didn't do anything to deserve being in the environments that they are in. And for me, as I already shared with you, growing up with this wonderful childhood that I had and being blessed to have these fantastic parents and household, then it's one of the ways that I can give back for that blessing that I received. So if I can help bless some other child by helping them get into a safe environment, then that's a cool thing to do, man.
Thank you for serving our community in that way. That's really something. Let's move to rapid fire. If you could have anyone as a mentor for one day, who would it be?
Malcolm X.
Okay.
Malcolm X. And that's surprising. And my own team gets nervous every time I talk about Malcolm X publicly because most people don't know the full story of Malcolm X. Malcolm X said and done some things that were hateful that I totally disagree with at different points of his life.
Yeah.
But the lesson that I absolutely love about Malcolm X is all of us talk about change. And in business, we talk about change.
Yeah.
And he is an awesome case study on someone who literally made life-changing decisions. Right. He was down one path of being a criminal and he was on that path and using drugs, et cetera. And then he changed his life and said, okay, I want to be a better person and commit to a faith. And he committed to it wholeheartedly, Ben. And then he learns that, you know what? I'm not on the right path here neither. What I believe in my whole being around my religious faith is actually teaching me some things that's not correct. And when he learned that, he changed again and became El Elite Shabazz, which most of us don't even know about. Before he was killed, he was different and had disavowed a number of the things that he said as Malcolm X. right? But what's cool about that is the fact that when he recognized he was wrong and he recognized that everything that he had internalized and he believed was not true, he changed. He made a commitment that, no, I want to do what's right, and I changed. And so I think that's an awesome lesson. I would love to just sit down and say, man, how did you find the wherewithal? How could you do that? Imagine your whole world is shaken, that what you base your whole life on, you realize fundamentally is not true. And then being able to make the change and add on top of that, knowing at risk to your own life.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I would love to sit down and have lunch with him and say, hey, man, help me understand this. I would love to get inside of his mind on how he was able to make those changes.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. What do you think is people's biggest misconception of you? People
believe that I only view issues one way. People believe I'm in an echo chamber. They believe that I'm in an echo chamber. And as much as I'm out here evangelizing about getting outside of echo chambers and avoiding binary thinking, that is a misbelief that people, misperception that people have about me, because they assume that if you are a DE&I practitioner, right, and then you're probably a really far left leaning progressive liberal. They just assume that.
Okay.
And I never tell them where I fall on a political spectrum because it's irrelevant. But when they assume that, they also assume that I reject anything that doesn't fall in that political ideology.
Yeah.
I tell folks, you're wrong about that. Because again, I'm not in an echo chamber. I'm not in any echo chamber. So I have thoughts and beliefs that cover the entire spectrum. And I listen to folks and consume information from folks and sources that covers the entire spectrum. So don't put me in a box, because people try and figure you out. So they say, okay, he's a D&I guy, so he's probably liberal. But wait a minute. No, he graduated from Texas A&M. That's one of the most conservative. So no, he's probably a conservative. But no, he talks about his love for hip hop all the time. No, okay, he's probably liberal. But wait a minute, he grew up in rural Texas. Okay, he's probably conservative. But no, they keep, and then I never tell people where I am on the spectrum. I don't, because again, it's not relevant. Well, I personally believe, right? But it's fun to watch people try and compute and figure it out for themselves.
Yeah, well, and also people want to, in Blink, Malcolm Gladwell talks about how we want to make character universal, and we want to do the same thing for people's political ideologies. We want to be able to fit someone into a box, kind of like you described earlier, and say, okay, liberal, conservative, and in a rare case, libertarian, but mostly people want to say, okay, this is where you are. And the truth is you're a person's political ideology ideally should be like an impressionist painting. It's everywhere. You have different thoughts on different issues, and you're not taking as gospel what anybody says about anything. You make your own, you form your own opinions about things, and you listen to a lot of different kinds of people. So I applaud you for that.
I love your analogy of an impressionist painting, which, by the way, would suggest that you're more liberal leaning.
Oh, interesting. What makes you say that?
I'm messing with you, man. I'm having fun. With you.
Oh, I see. Actually, I did read somewhere that if you ask someone if they, and this is, by the way, this is another effort at pigeonholing people. If you ask someone if they prefer the people in their lives to be simple or complex, people who lean left politically are more likely to, it's not 100% of course, but people who lean left politically are more likely to say that they prefer people to be complex. And people who lean right are more likely to prefer the people in their life to be more simple. And I thought that was fascinating. And I wonder what it says about how political ideologies form us and how we form political ideologies for ourselves.
So two things I would say that is fascinating. I've seen those data points as well. I think it represents a couple of things. One is I don't want to play psychologist here, although I did take a psychology course at A&M. But there's also some projection that's
Oh,
going
okay.
on, right?
Yeah.
So if I am a liberal and I say that I prefer complex folks, part of that is because I really view myself as being complex too,
Oh,
which is why you see this stereotype, that this narrative around, even terminology around liberal intellectuals,
yeah.
right? You don't hear that as often. You don't hear the term conservative intellectuals as
No,
much.
not as often.
Liberals. So this narrative has formed around that.
Yeah.
And then politically, the opposite, right? In a number of conservative circles, to say that you are an intellectual can be viewed negatively,
True.
right? And so is it surprising that a conservative, and again, we're generalizing here, right? We're talking about groups, but would be more likely to say they prefer people who are more simple.
Right.
It's because of all of the connotations that are associated with the folks that are complex or these intellectuals. Like,
It's
I
a
don't
feedback loop.
it's Aggies. Let's generalize even more. It's like showing up at A&M and saying, hey, when we talk about being one of the top public universities in this country, right?
Yeah.
Remember when we first were launching A&M 2020?
Yeah.
And then we specifically, at times, some of our leaders at A&M were talking about Berkeley. Do you remember the backlash? That there were a number of Aggies that said, there is nothing about Berkeley that I'm aspiring to be, right? I don't want to be Berkeley, right? Because there is a connotation that's associated with Berkeley that is very different than one that is associated with A&M. So do you, if you're Ag, right, do you really want to be like Berkeley? I don't know. But these are these things that we formulated in our own minds. And again, the only reason why I talk about these things publicly, Ben, is because I use it as another reason to encourage all of us to get outside of the echo chamber.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the problem is, if I'm only listening to one viewpoint or vantage point, then I lose the value of growing and learning from these other perspectives. That's what being in an echo chamber, that's how it cripples us. And I think that's part of the reason why the discourse in this country has become so toxic on so many of these issues, because we are so wedded to one viewpoint. And then we completely discount anything that's different than that. It's not productive.
I agree. Corey, what a discussion. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your insights. This was incredible.
Cool. I enjoyed the conversation with you, Ben. And again, thanks for having me and giving me an opportunity to get on my soapbox on a couple of issues, but more importantly, to share, some of my insights, some of the things I've learned along the way. Hopefully it's helpful for the people that are listening.
Well, if it helps anyone take one step toward escaping their own echo chamber, it was a success.
That's huge. That is huge. Man, I can't emphasize that too much, right? You can't get outside these echo chambers and avoiding binary thinking, right? I mean, I think those two would really be impactful. I know they will be impactful for anyone who takes those steps. And all of us at A&M, right, in the A&M family, the Aggie family, we all strive to be better leaders. That's one of the really cool things about this university, is I think it produces incredible leaders. And that's one of the things that we place a really high value on, is leadership. Yeah. And I'm here to tell you that if you cannot be a great leader and a really effective leader as you need to be if you are inside of an echo chamber and you approach issues in a binary way. You just can't. You just cannot. So that has to be a priority for all of us as leaders, is to ensure we're not in that space. It's just not good. And your team knows it. The people that you're trying to lead, they will know soon enough whether or not you are in an echo chamber. They will know it. And so you can't hide from that. They will know it.
As EA Games used to say, challenge everything.
We hope you enjoyed the show with Corey. For our top 3 takeaways, I wanted to start with diversity, equity, and inclusion as a goal, but not an end state. That there is not necessarily a point of perfection with diversity, equity, and inclusion. I thought that was a really important point, I'm sure that applies to other aspects of our lives as well, but thinking of it as something that we can constantly improve and not an end state to achieve.
Yes, yes. And I think there's always going to be there's always going to be a group of people that for one reason or another are not getting quite the same opportunities as others. And the idea of trying to level that playing field, to me, where one of the things that is so important about leveling the playing field is that's actually what's optimum from an economic efficiency standpoint in the long run. It's what creates a system where everyone can put the maximum amount back into the system as well.
And Corey said it on the episode where, there's a business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you want everyone to bring their best to work every day. And that is, that's what Corey really saw as his role, and his mission was to support everyone in bringing their best to work every day. And I think there's a social justice aspect of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I think is important. It's the right thing to do, but it's also the economically right thing to do. And it's okay to embrace both aspects of that.
Yes. Yes. It is, in my opinion, over the long term, it's crucial to embrace both aspects of that. And it also helps inform the question that you were just talking about, which is, all right, where does this end? Well, actually, it doesn't end, because you're always looking to see, okay, like, where is the inequity now? And there's always going to be something. It's just the nature of how the universe works. Like, the universe does not care about equal opportunity. So we have to.
Yeah, certainly create balances where we've also created imbalances, because the universe doesn't care about a lot of the imbalances that we've created either.
That's true. That's right.
And so we have to fix those. For our second takeaway, I wanted to talk about, Corey mentioned how forums for employees to express their own experiences was really important, and was an important form of communication that he found at AT&T. And we found that here too, that people, students, employees just want a place to, or not just, but one of the things that is important is they want a place to be able to talk about their experiences and have other people understand those experiences, or shared experiences in that process, and how important that is to just be able to express, not even with the need for action necessarily, although that can be the case, but just an opportunity to express oneself and experiences.
That it's a tough one for me, because my response is always, okay, what do we do about this? And sometimes the right answer is just listen, just be present, just pay attention to what's going on. There may be something to do later, but right now, what's really important is, as you said, the expression. And I have to pull myself out of the solution.
For sure. And it's hard to even, for me, it's hard to sometimes even listen to someone get to the end of a statement, because I'm like, yes, I know. And here's what we can do about that, because it is so action. So our mindset is so action solution oriented, but people first and foremost want to be heard. And for our last takeaway, Corey talked about Lovecraft Country and using a television show to be an avenue for creating these difficult conversations. And I think that's a really good place to do that too, because it is a little bit separated from the organization. It's not always, it doesn't have to specifically be about your experiences within the organization, but within the world. And it takes a little bit of separation from it being about, this happened at this day, at this time, and it's a major HR issue now, but to make it about something that where we can understand, oh, that's that character's experience. Here's something I've experienced like it. It brings just another kind of comfort level to have those conversations. I know for a lot of people, The Wire back in the day was that for a lot of people, opened up a lot of conversations. I've heard predominantly for white people, but for people to have conversations certainly about some of the challenges that are out there in the world, and in the world, a low income world that we might not all experience. And so it certainly shows can bridge some of those gaps for us.
Yeah, no doubt. And I loved The Wire. I haven't watched much Lovecraft Country, but I think that the idea of like identification doesn't have to be that person is me or I'm that person. Like even just finding a little piece of something to identify with in another person's struggle. I think that is why the move for diversity and inclusion in film and television has been so important over the last couple of years. And I want my nephews and nieces to be able to look at a screen and like there's something that is unfortunately instantly identifiable in someone who looks like us. And so in order to accommodate that, this is 100% necessary. And so I feel like the richness of storytelling around underserved communities, historically underserved communities, is going to be a massive net positive for society.
I agree. Well, we hope that you found some great insights in Corey's episode and his experiences that he so kindly shared. Ben, do you want to close us with a quote?
I would love to close us with a quote. Show up, show up, show up. And after a while, the muse shows up too. Isabel Allende.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
An MBA from Texas A&M University can take your career to a whole new level. With full-time and weekend options, Texas A&M suits your schedule. So get a better gig. Visit mba.tamu.edu.
Looking to start a podcast? Trying to tackle questions like, how do I record? How do I edit? How can I get music for my show? What equipment do I need? How do I distribute it? Good news. The podcast architects are here to help, whether that's from start to finish, fixing the audio quality, helping you get the episodes posted. Go to podconsulting.co. Everyone has something worth sharing with the world.